Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Tales from the Cabin. I'm your host, Joey Leone, and we're going to have some fun tonight. Celebrate the 57th anniversary of the Woodstock concert. That's right. I'm recording this on August the 15th, 2026. What a concert. What a cultural event it was. And it was on the news. I was only, I think I just turned 13. So, I mean, it wasn't like, I wasn't glued to the TV to find everything about it. And there was really no video of it. We had to wait eagerly until the movie came out a year later, a little over a year later. And that album and that movie dominated my life for the next 2 years. It was everything you wanted. I mean, as an aspiring young teenage musician, we were so influenced by that record that we ended up doing with my band 2 Cents Plain at the time, my first band. We did the Soul Sacrifice by Santana in the Marine Park Junior High School talent show and ended up winning, although Marcy Greenberg should have won. But that's another story for another time. Anyway, but tonight's podcast is going to be celebrating Woodstock, but we're really going to talk about the 5 acts whose careers changed because of Woodstock. People like Jimi Hendrix and The Who were already big stars, but there were some acts that really nobody had really heard of or had heard very little of. And we're going to cover those 5 acts tonight, and we're going to talk about them, and we're going to talk about what happened and subsequent what happened in their careers. The first band I'm going to talk about is one I just mentioned, and that's Santana. And Santana was a San Francisco band that appeared at Woodstock. They were heavily Latin influenced because the leader of the band was Carlos Santana. They had 2 percussionists in the band. They had a really great drummer, Mike Shreve, and Greg Rowley was the keyboard player, and the bass player was Dave Brown. And they were just a really good band, and they got a shot at Woodstock, and they made the movie, and boy, they just took off from that point on. Carlos Santana's career took off from then until still going now. He's still around. But and the song that was in the movie was Soul Sacrifice, which was an instrumental. And like I said before, that was so influential, that song in the movie, that we copied it note for note. Interestingly enough, my band 2 Cents Plain at the time, which had Richard Tamini, great keyboard player, Thomas Barcelona, of course, my best friend and dear drummer, Sebi Lazara, guitar player extraordinaire, and Ronnie Barbati of L&B Spumoni Garden fame was the percussionist, because we needed a percussionist if we were going to do Soul Sacrifice. And it was my influence, as an insane young musician, that instead of having like rehearsals, we should just rehearse that one song to death. We did. And we played it pretty much note for note, a bunch of 14-year-old kids and 15-year-old kids playing Soul Sacrifice note for note. It was amazing. And Tommy's drum solo was just out of this world. But Santana came on stage that day, and Carlos supposedly had taken some LSD, and he had his Gibson SG, but it was an SG Special with the P90 pickups in it. He was playing guitar through a Galleon Kruger, believe it or not, prototype guitar amp that had been made in California. It was a solid-state amp. But Carlos got a great sound, and his minor guitar solo was right there. And they just came out there, and they killed it from the first note to the last note. And Carlos became an iconic, really, guitar player after that. I mean, Carlos Santana's name was mentioned, in the same ranks as people like Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton. And Carlos had a great career and has a great career. And so the first band that really changed their lives, changed their careers, was Santana at Woodstock. The second band I'm going to mention is an English band. They were pretty much a blues band 10 years after, fronted by the great Alvin Lee. Now, they did a song in the movie Woodstock called I'm Going Home, which was basically a long jam. And if you notice in the movie and on the record, there's a couple of really kind of like floppy edits in the tune, really not very good edits, but because the song went on a long time. And I guess they were just jamming and never thinking that would become the song that they would be known by. And I've seen interviews with Alvin Lee where he said that tune kind of followed him in not such a good way, because they were really a straight ahead blues band. They had Chick Churchill on the Hammond organ, Rick Lee on drums, and Leo Lyons on bass. They were a strict blues band, and if you listen to one of their early albums called Undead, which was a live album, they were doing straight ahead blues. And Alvin Lee's guitar playing, as you know from listening to me talk already, I love that clean style. And he played a really clean kind of style, but he had a beautiful sound. He played an E.S. Gibson, I think it was a 345, and he had like pickups added to it. It was modified. And he just was fast. I mean, in those days, we didn't know nothing. Alvin Lee was like the fastest guitar player. Like that meant something, It was like he was like Mario Andretti or something. He was trying to win the Indianapolis 500 of guitar. But we thought it was cool because he was the fastest. But he was a really tasty guitar player. And in the record that they did, Undead, by the way, recorded at Kluk's Cleek, which must have been a little blues club or something. And they just played the heck out of the blues. And they did like Woody Herman tune, like Woodchopper's Ball on that record. But in Woodstock, they played I'm Going Home, and it became their signature song, which wasn't even a song. It never even really appeared, in that length on a record. I think it was on one of their early records, just was like kind of almost like a Chuck Berry kind of jam. And then one of the iconic moments in Woodstock is at the end when Alvin Lee's walking off the stage in his signature clogs, which every friggin' guitar player in Brooklyn for 2 years was wearing clogs and shag haircuts. They rolled a watermelon on the stage in a moment that only could be captured, in the movie of Woodstock. And he picks up the watermelon, puts it on his shoulder, and walks off the stage with it. What a great moment that was. But they went on after that. They had an album called Shh, like SSH. Which was a really good album, and they kind of started to play a little bit more psychedelic, maybe not psychedelic, a little bit more electric, a little kind of more like Cream. That record they had that started off with a cool tune called Bad Scene, and they had Good Morning Little Schoolgirl, which is one I covered with my band, which had a great riff in it that I played back in Brooklyn with Jimmy Agnello, the great Jimmy Agnello, on guitar, and me on bass, Tommy Barcelona on drums. That was our little trio. They played the heck out of that tune. And they went on. I think their biggest radio hit was I Want to Change the World. I'd Love to Change the World. And, Alvin Lee went on, and, he kind of went into obscurity, I think, after I Want to Change the World. They almost kind of became like a one-hit wonder band because they never really had a big radio hit after that. But Alvin Lee's a great guitar player, and, he really did kind of become one of the guitar heroes of the 60s. For that short period of time, probably from 69 to like 75, he was mentioned as one of the great guitar players. After that, he kind of disappeared from that scene. But 10 years after, at Woodstock, changed their careers. Some might think for the worse, but definitely for the better as far as their fame and fortune. The third band I'm going to mention is Sly and the Family Stone. And you don't, just like when Otis Redding played at Monterey, you didn't find many classic R&B bands playing these big rock festivals. And Sly and the Family Stone were not your classic R&B band. By the time they played Woodstock, they were already writing hit records. And Sly Stone, was a great leader and great frontman. And it was interesting because you don't see many guys fronting bands on keyboard, although later on you'd see him playing his white Telecaster on the Mike Douglas show. But Sly Stone and his brother Freddie, he was the guitar player. Larry Graham was the bass player, and I'll talk a little bit about him in a minute. Rose Stone was his sister. She was the keyboard player. And Cynthia Robinson was the trumpet player, and she danced to the music. Yeah, And they had a great, great drummer, Greg Arago, and a spectacularly good sax player named Jerry Martini. So they were just a tight band. And I always loved the black soul bands that had the white drummers, too. I always thought that was really cool. Just like a lot of white bands had the black drummer. But they just came on there, and they were well known at the time. But that Woodstock appearance and their appearance in that movie, remember, the appearance in the movie was the thing that really pushed these bands over the top. It wasn't just the record, the album. And Sly with his fringed vest and his cool look and his big sunglasses, and he just came out and tore it up. I mean, at a level that no really white bands could do because of that R&B funk, background, that Chitlin circuit, history that all the black bands of that era really went through. Like I said, when you saw Otis Redding playing at Monterey, people hadn't seen, a great R&B singer like an Otis Redding or a James Brown or a Joe Tex on a big stage like that. They were known, as niche acts, and years before that, unfortunately, were considered race acts. They would call them in a less enlightened time in our country. But Sly Stone came out and he played, and then that fame and fortune took him to, like I said before, the Mike Douglas show and all these shows. Unfortunately, Sly developed, like a lot of guys did, a bad drug habit, ended up homeless, and then, but was so well respected. And when they did Want to Take You Higher and Dance to the Music and at Woodstock, it just tore the place up. And the video of it was shot. A lot of the Woodstock video was not shot like a concert movie. It was shot like almost kind of a semi-documentary. A lot of close-ups, which those of us who are musicians don't like. Concert footage where it's not showing the whole band. As a matter of fact, when I was looking for pictures online of Sly and the Family Stone at Woodstock, there aren't many pictures of the whole band playing. Everybody was just focused on Sly, but they had so many great records. And the album Stand, which was on Epic Records, that really took off after that as well. So Sly and the Family Stone at Woodstock, another band who just skyrocketed after that great performance. Another band I'm going to talk about that really took off after Woodstock, and their performance in the movie did something for them that nobody had expected. A bunch of guys from Brooklyn and New York City, a 50s band called Sha Na Na. Now, there's a lot of stories of how they got on the bill. I'm not going to go into that, of Woodstock. But believe it or not, they went on in the Monday early morning before Jimi Hendrix. But Sha Na Na came on the stage in their gold lame outfits and their 50s, thing, and, did Danny and the Juniors at the Hop. And it's in the movie. I mean, you weren't going to make that movie. I mean, there's been plenty of bands. Creedence didn't make the movie. Mountain didn't make the movie. Janis Joplin didn't make the movie. A lot of people didn't make the movie. But Sha Na Na did. And they came out and they tore it up. Now, interestingly enough, Sha Na Na later on became more famous and had their own TV show running on I think it was on the ABC network from 77 to 81. So they became like kind of a 70s iconic band, but they played in Woodstock in 69, and they just had this kind of momentum that just kept rolling and rolling. Interesting, the guy that was known for Sha Na Na was John Bauman, which used to call Bowser. He had that guy with that, with that pose, the skinny guy with the cigarettes rolled up in his T-shirt. He wasn't even in Sha Na Na at the time, but one person that was in Sha Na Na at the time was one of my favorite singers and one of my favorite solo artists was a guy named Henry Gross. He was from Brooklyn, graduate of Brooklyn College. Henry Gross was just a spectacularly good singer. He had a hit record, one of my favorite records of all time, called Shannon, which was about his dog, believe it or not. And his falsetto voice, I sang that song a couple of times, and I just loved this song. I sang it in my solo act. And, he was 18 years old when he left Brooklyn College and started Sha Na Na. He was one of the guys that started. Now, by the time Sha Na Na had become a TV sensation, most of those guys were out of the band. But like I say, you recognize Bowser. There was a guy named Jocko. He was one of the guys you recognized from the TV show as well. Marcelino, his last name was. But, from 77 to 81, they had a very popular TV show. It was kind of campy comedy stuff, and they would do a couple of tunes. But, Sha Na Na came out, and they just took over the stage. And interestingly, Henry Gross was actually playing guitar in the band and singing background with his great falsetto. But they had two bass singers, and they were just a bunch of cool guys, who had this niche band who just shouldn't have been on Woodstock. Like I said, I probably should do some more research to find out how they actually got the gig. It probably was somebody just figured, hey, what the hell, put these guys on. But Sha Na Na, really, you check out their performance in the movie. It is an iconic performance. And like I remember, that was during that Woodstock era, that 50s, doo-wop and Greaser era was not very popular. Matter of fact, those guys were considered to be like greasers and made fun of because that was an old era. It was like when the grunge guys would make fun of the heavy metal guys. Like, oh, look at that nonsense. But they came out in Woodstock and tore it up. Sha-na-na, Woodstock. And then the last band I'm going to talk about here that made a name at Woodstock, and I think might be the band that maybe had the most consistency afterwards, was Joe Cocker, because he was a solo artist. And Joe Cocker and the Grease Band came on, and they did a song, an old Beatles song called Little Help from My Friends, Remember It. That's what Joe said. And there's great videos on there where like guys make fun of Joe's performance. And of course, there's the iconic performance of him on Saturday Night Live playing with one of my favorite bands, Stuff, where John Belushi comes out and does an imitation, and they do like dueling Joe Cockers. But Joe had that kind of freaky thing he would do on the stage where he would, twist his body around in kind of weird, deformities to get these notes out. But Joe could sing. It's amazing how he did. And of course, we all know that Joe was a heavy drinker. But the band that he had with him, the Grease Band, was a small band. It wasn't, a big band. He had Henry McCullough on guitar, who ended up going on and playing with Wings. Really excellent guitar player. And he's the guy that does that high falsetto vocal. Do you need anybody? And they had Chris Stanton, of course, on the keyboard, who ended up going on playing with the Stones. He played with The Who. He's played with everybody. Chris Stanton, you look him up. And they were just a great band. And Joe Cocker just tore it up. And I don't know if it seems like some of that is kind of impromptu, but the band was just killing. And, these British cats, they had it good. And they had what they have on stage. They had a keyboard player, a bass player, a guitar player, and Joe Cocker. And Joe just, he had an album out called With a Little Help from My Friends, which was his first album on A&M Records. That was a pretty successful album. I think Jimmy Page played on the album. But they had a Little Help from My Friends on that album. That was his first album. And then that second album came out, where he had, other hits. I think he had Delta Lady on that one. And then he goes on from there and gets involved with this big world tour, because now, after Woodstock, Joe's career blows up. They can't get enough of Joe Cocker. He, everybody wants him. So he goes on this miraculous tour. He was on A&M Records at the time, and who was owned by A&M Records was Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss, and they gave him a plane, and they filmed an amazing video. I think one of the top 3 concert video of music movies of all time, Mad Dogs and Englishmen. They go out with this massive tour. Joe takes like 40 people on the road with him, and it's well documented in the documentary. And who does he have as the band leader? Leon Russell. And Leon Russell was a big star, in the studio sessions and known, around, a very well respected guy, great songwriter and great band leader. But he took off after this too. And there's such great footage of that. Leon, of course, is one of the greatest piano players of the rock and roll era, right up there with Elton John. But man, he played some great electric guitar. There's video of him playing like a black Les Paul Custom, and he just tearing it up on the guitar, because the guy could play anything. You could give him a salami and he'd probably get some notes out of it. But Joe, that Mad Dogs and Englishmen album and the film, it just, and then, a lot of those people in that movie, were people that ended up being in Derek and the Dominoes. They were like alumni of like Delaney and Bonnie's band. There were some great musicians, Jim Gordon, Carl Radle. Bobby Whitlock, all these great musicians. And that album, Mad Dogs and Englishmen is one of the great one of the great live albums. But Joe's career after Woodstock was and it just kept going and going. Joe had hits. You Are So Beautiful was a great hit record that he had. He had Delta Lady. But believe it or not, in 1983 he had a song from a movie with a relatively unknown singer named Jennifer Warnes, Lift Us Up Where We Belong, which was like, who knows? And of course, here I get to be a little bit of a angry guy. Do you believe that Joe Cocker was not put in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame until 2025 after he died? What the hell is wrong with that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? I mean, they just constantly make mistake after mistake after mistake. I'm not going to get into who is in and who's not in, but it's just ridiculous. Joe Cocker not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? I mean, it's unbelievable. Joe went on to have a great career. And, it was funny because as he got older, he was kind of got frail and, he gave up drinking after a while. But after, drinking the way he did, I mean, it beat the hell out of his body. And you'd see him on stage and he'd still make the notes. It was unbelievable. Like you'd see this guy on stage and the first thing you're watching him, he's like, he's not going to make those notes, and boom, there he does, And so Joe Cocker. So those are the bands, the 5 bands that I will celebrate tonight on the anniversary of Woodstock as the bands that Woodstock changed their careers. And hope you enjoy this video. Check out in the description, I will put a playlist of these bands and their performances at Woodstock in the playlist so you can follow along with it. And I'll be doing that from now on. There'll be playlists in the description of the videos on my podcast. And I have put them in some of the previous ones. So please like, share, subscribe. Tell your friends about the Tales from the Cabin podcast. And I'm going to keep coming at you once a week with a new podcast. So thanks for stopping by. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye.